Hello, good to see you again. I can't see you, but it's good to see you again. I want to do a little review of weeks 9 and 10, the going deeper questions, because this week, if you're on schedule, you're going to be reviewing 2 weeks worth of going deeper questions. So this is weeks 9 and 10. You've gotten through, I should say congratulations, you've gotten through the assessments in week 8. Week 8 has been clarified a whole lot by the hard work of Christina Wagner and Christy Dodds, and I've done a little bit, but it is still very hard and confusing. But if your mentee has gone through it, weeks 9 through 12, the rest of it is relatively easy, depending on the relational dynamics in your mentee's life. Meaning, if what they've been working through so far in Thrive has been primarily personal, then they might not have a whole lot of things to clean up relationally. But if there's a lot of relational tension, it could be a difficult marriage, or friends who are estranged, or where there's unforgiveness, wherever there's strong feelings of hurt and betrayal or whatever, weeks 9 and 10 can be pretty difficult. So what I want to do is just look over a little bit on comment on some things from week 9. These questions. Question 1. How does, basically asking, how does fear prevent you from loving others as Christ does? That's a good place to remind your mentee of the truths of God's presence in their particular fears. I'm thinking of Isaiah 41:10. It says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." God is present in our particular fears. And when you ask that question, if they have some fears they have in loving others as Christ does, let them answer that question and encourage them to be specific, but then point them to Christ. Don't tell them just to not be afraid or to get over it. It helps to remind them God's with them. Everywhere fear is addressed, God says, "I'm with you." Philippians 4:5 and 6. Don't be anxious. 6 and 7 says, "Don't be anxious about anything." But the verse right before it, verse 5, says, "The Lord is near. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything." So, number 2, have you ever used your knowledge or intellect as a source of pride to beat people down rather than build them up? My guess is that most mentees will not have the humility and insight to answer that question honestly or with great insight. If they really want to find out the answer to that question, I would encourage them to ask a loved one or someone who knows them well. If they're married, to ask their spouse, to say, "Honey, one of the questions I got from Thrive was," number 2, they read it, "I realize I probably don't know as well as those around me how I do with my knowledge. Am I proud? Do I use my knowledge to push other people down? Do you ever feel that way around me?" And if they can ask that with a sincere, humble posture, they're going to get an honest answer. This is just something to consider. Number 3, I'm not going to go through all the questions here, but I'm just going to comment. Number 3 on week 9, if they don't know what idols they have, you might want to look back on the assessments and look at the light blue section that's entitled, "What part of self was threatened or seeking satisfaction?" And it says, if you see a lot of checks under self-esteem or personal relationships or material, those point to the different idols that your mentee might have. And then for numbers 4 and 5, that's just zooming in on who may or may not be worth reaching out to confess to make amends to. And there was a template for making amends that I think I'm going to send with this email, but it's just addressing those who are affected, avoid excusing your wrongs or being overly dramatic, admit specific attitudes and actions, acknowledge the hurt and express regret for the harm caused, accept the consequences and be willing to make restitution, accompany confession with altered attitudes and actions, and ask for forgiveness. That was a hiccup. Anyway, So those steps really help make a good confession. I would add avoid if, but, or maybe. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I'm sorry I did this, but I was forced to because you did this. You know, the word but or the word if usually negates good confessions. So for week 10, so week 9 was, reconciling and amending, making things right by reaching out and asking for forgiveness. Week 10, those questions are more geared around like who is it that you need to forgive. So with number 1, who do you have difficulty forgiving? I would say, just as a word of caution, and it might be mentioned in here, I didn't look too closely, but in cases where there's been abuse, you may want to remind them that forgiving does not necessarily mean trusting them or reestablishing a connection with them, especially if it's unsafe or it's unwise. Number 2 continues that train of thought. Ask your mentee how they feel. How do they feel led to pursue forgiveness specifically? If you can help them get specific, that's helpful. Number 3 talks about non-Christians who you can forgive. I would just say where forgiveness is really a gracious act, this is a very powerful witness. And then number 4, discovering or naming, getting specific about where your mentee is stuck in forgiveness allows them to be deliberate in how they approach it. It allows them to focus their prayers more deliberately. Because if you're just vague, in a vague sense, I don't want to forgive, if you can get down to what the specific issue is, what it is that they're afraid of, they can pray more specifically and in a more helpful way. Number 5 is similar to number 4 in my opinion. Number 6, I would say, are there any relationships you believe are beyond repair? A good verse to guide you in this is Romans 12:18. It says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. And I just want to encourage you for the last question there, number 7 at least, to just spend some time closing in prayer. And if your mentee doesn't have much, as far as there aren't any people to reconcile with, one of the guys I'm meeting with, I'm suspecting he's not going to have anybody. So we might just have a good conversation and just encourage, ask them to share what they're learning so far. But I hope that's helpful. I will talk to you later.